There is a moment in certain American cities where the street just ends. Not because of a building or a park or a river, but because of a wall of concrete above you, the sound of traffic moving fast overhead, and a neighborhood on the other side that feels like it belongs to a completely different city. In the 1950s, the United States launched the largest road building program in human history, and somebody had to decide where those roads would go. In 7 American cities, the answer kept being the same kind of neighborhood, the same kind of community. Gone. So how did a road do this to a city? We are counting them down, and by the end, you will have to decide for yourself whether that is a coincidence or something else entirely. Number 7, Houston, Texas. Drive through downtown Houston today, and something feels off before you can name it. Where a city center should be dense and alive, there are parking lots covering 26% of the entire downtown. By 1940, the city held close to 400,000 people within roughly a 4-mile radius. What it lacked was any geographical obstacle. No coastline, no mountains, no major river. When freeway construction began in the late 1940s, nothing was standing in the way, and so the roads went everywhere. 40,000 people were displaced in the decades that followed. Historic neighborhoods were severed, downtown was cleared for parking, and the city's land area grew from 250 square miles in the mid-1950s to 551 square miles by 1980. The communities that bore the most disruption were overwhelmingly those with the least political capital to resist it. Today, Houston consistently ranks among the worst cities in the country for traffic. The freeways that were supposed to solve a movement problem created a city so spread out that movement became the defining challenge of daily life. Was this a failure of planning? Or was the absence of any limit exactly what the plan intended? Keep that question in mind, because it gets harder to answer the further down this list we go. Number 6, Detroit, Michigan. Walking through downtown Detroit, you notice that getting anywhere requires going over things. Overpasses, underpasses, concrete ramps cutting across what should be ordinary city blocks. Once you are inside it, the divisions are everywhere. Detroit entered the post-war era as one of the most powerful industrial cities in the world. Dense, employed, and deeply segregated. Interstate 375 and Interstate 75 were constructed through its heart, turning downtown into a traffic island surrounded by elevated freeway on multiple sides and the Detroit River on another. Tens of thousands of residents were displaced, and much of the construction was widely regarded as racially targeted, cutting through African American neighborhoods in ways that were not accidental in their geography. The second blow came in the 1970s, when the Jeffries Freeway, Interstate 96, was added. Detroit had already lost about 18% of its 1950 population, and the new highway made suburban flight considerably easier. In places, it stretched to 18 lanes and 600 feet in width, with around 3,500 buildings demolished in its path. Today, it carries less than half the traffic it did 50 years ago, a quiet monument to a population that largely left. In Houston, the freeway enabled sprawl. In Detroit, it accelerated abandonment. 2 different outcomes, the same basic logic. And that logic keeps reappearing. Number 5, Buffalo, New York. Buffalo sits right next to the water and can barely reach it. Lake Erie is right there. The Niagara River runs along its edge, and yet, if you try to walk from the city center to the lake, the freeway gets in the way before you ever reach the shore. In the 1950s and 1960s, the city shed nearly 120,000 residents as suburbanization took hold. The Kensington Expressway, completed in 1967, was built to serve that outward growth by running directly through the Humboldt Parkway, a wide, scenic, tree-lined boulevard. Thousands of residents were displaced, thousands of buildings demolished, and the expressway became a physical boundary that deepened racial and economic divides already present in the city. Then there is Interstate 190, which opened in 1959 and sealed most of Buffalo off from its own waterfront entirely, reducing access to a few parks and a handful of crossings. Buffalo remains a waterfront city that most of its own residents cannot easily reach. Proposals to cap the Kensington Expressway and restore green space above it are still caught in legal challenges. 3 cities in, and the pattern is already taking shape, but the next 4 are where it becomes very difficult to explain away. Number 4. New Orleans, Louisiana. Walk beneath the Claiborne Expressway today, and the first thing you notice is the noise. Traffic rolling above you, constant and low. Then, the shadow. A wide, dark corridor of concrete cutting through what was once one of the most vibrant streets in the American South. Before the expressway arrived, Claiborne Avenue was the main street of Black New Orleans, lined with ancient oak trees and packed with businesses running through the Treme neighborhood, one of the oldest African-American communities in the United States. Families gathered there during carnival season. It was a living civic corridor by every account. In February 1966, workers arrived with chainsaws and began cutting down the oaks. No public hearing process existed, and many residents were never informed that the plan was coming. Hundreds of families were displaced as the Claiborne Expressway was elevated directly above the boulevard and opened in 1968. Within a decade, registered businesses along Claiborne Avenue had declined by 50%. Meanwhile, a riverfront elevated highway planned through the French Quarter nearby was stopped cold by well-connected preservationists. The Claiborne community had no such access. Would this route have been chosen if the neighborhood it ran through had held different demographics? Number 3. Nashville, Tennessee. There's a stretch of Nashville where the street grid simply does not connect the way it should. Institutions that were once part of the same neighborhood now sit on opposite sides of a freeway, separated by a decision nobody living there was asked to approve. Jefferson Street was the heart of Black Nashville, anchored by Fisk University, Tennessee State University, and Meharry Medical College, a corridor where Little Richard, Aretha Franklin, and Bobby Blue Bland all got their starts. Around 80% of Nashville's African-American-owned businesses operated here. Interstate 40 was routed directly through this corridor. The original plan had placed the highway near Vanderbilt University in a predominantly white area of Midtown. That route was changed. The final alignment demolished approximately 650 homes and 27 apartment buildings, displaced nearly 1,500 people, and destroyed around 128 businesses, roughly 80% of which were Black-owned. Residents sued in federal court in one of the first legal challenges to an interstate on racial grounds. The case was ultimately unsuccessful. And this is where it stops being a traffic story. The freeway arrived with a very specific route, and that route consistently went through the same kinds of places. At this point, you start to realize this was not just one bad decision. This was a pattern. Number 2. Baltimore, Maryland. In West Baltimore, there is a road that ends at a wall. Built to connect to a larger freeway system that was never finished, it sits there today as one of the most visible reminders of what happens when a city fights back and only partly wins. Locals call it the highway to nowhere. In the 1960s and 1970s, Baltimore had one of the most aggressive freeway plans of any American city. The Franklin-Mulberry Corridor in West Baltimore was chosen as the path through a predominantly Black working-class community. Around 971 homes, 62 businesses, and 1 school were demolished, displacing more than 2,800 people. But organized community opposition succeeded in stopping significant portions of the plan. Fells Point and Canton were saved. Interstate 70 was stopped at the city line. Interstate 83 ends abruptly downtown, leaving behind connector roads that end at walls and overpasses that lead to nothing. Baltimore shows both outcomes in the same city, within a few miles of each other. If resistance worked here, what does that tell us about every city on this list, where the community did not have the power to stop it? Number 1. Syracuse, New York. Drive into Syracuse and the first thing you see is the Viaduct. A long, elevated stretch of Interstate 81 runs directly through the middle of the city, hovering above the street grid below it. It has been there for 60 years, and the neighborhood in which it was built has never fully recovered. The viaduct was constructed between 1964 and 1969, directly through the 15th Ward, a neighborhood that housed the majority of Syracuse's black population, as well as significant Jewish and immigrant communities. The city tore down 90% of the ward's structures. More than 1,300 families were displaced. The residents protested. Syracuse's Congress on Racial Equality appealed directly to the mayor to halt construction in 1963. The mayor refused. The highway divided the city along lines that have not shifted meaningfully in 6 decades. The residents relocated to the south side, but the pollution and blight followed them there too. Now, the viaduct has reached the end of its structural life. New York State has committed to a $2.3 billion project to replace it with a surface-level community grid. Demolition is already underway. Whether it repairs what was broken is a question that will take another generation to answer. 7 cities, 7 freeways, and the same sequence every time. A road is needed, a route is chosen, a specific community absorbs the cost, and the consequences outlast everyone who made the decision. So was this poor planning? The record suggests it was, in most of these cases, a very precise kind of planning that simply never had to answer for itself. Infrastructure is supposed to serve cities, but blueprints do not show the street life that disappears when a freeway goes through. The businesses that close, the communities that scatter, or the neighborhoods that take generations to stop grieving what they lost. The question is not just how these freeways are built, it is who decided what got destroyed to build them, and why those communities specifically never got to vote on the answer. I'll keep finding the world's hidden corners. You just have to click subscribe to come along.